really.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a follow-up video to one that we produced probably 12 months ago called How to Find Electrical Apprenticeship. And now we're going to be going for how to keep an electrical apprenticeship, because as well as having the success over the years, Joe, we've obviously seen people walk into our workshops and tell us they've got jobs. We've also had the disappointment of them walking through the same doors saying that they're no longer employed by those people. So we're going to run through some top tips, I would suggest, on how to keep your apprenticeship. Would you like to start, Joe?
Yeah, so the key trick, it seems, is to keep your phone in your pocket. Seems to be one of the major drivers, doesn't it, with feedback that we've had from learners in the past when we've spoken to them about the issues that they've been up against. Yeah, it does seem to be a bit of a driving force, and we know that mobile phones everybody's got one and everybody uses them for everything nowadays, and there's a time and a place for it, but I think when you're in the workplace and you've got a job to be getting with, if you're constantly on your phone, then you're not going to last very long in that position.
And we've seen it, haven't we? It becomes the first of many factors, but the reliance on the phone in the hand is usually the one that then kicks into some of the other things that we're going to talk about that become a collection of things that become a problem. So phone being the most relevant one at the start.
I think in fairness, a lot of learners don't really realise that they're on it as much as they are, probably. I think they think, well, I'm just checking, I've got a message, so I'm just checking my message, and that's fine. If you get one of those every couple of hours, then that's no one's going to complain about that. But if you every 5 minutes, then that's when it starts to become a problem. And I just don't think they realise how much time they lose by being on their phone, especially during the workday.
Yeah, and you can't, and I'd say you can't use anyone else's use of the phone as a defence against using your own, especially as an apprentice. You'll probably be the lowest person in that food chain. So, of course, if you're using your phone, that won't be acceptable. If the person you're working with, or electrical team you're working with, or electrician using theirs, well, that's fine, because they're setting the rules, not obviously abiding by them. Yeah. Kicks into my second one. I would suggest that as well as the phone being an issue, timekeeping has been a very a point that's been raised many times in the last 18 months, 2 years. What's your thinking on timekeeping, Joe?
Yeah, it's something that we battled at the college since day one, since we both started teaching. Really, there's always people who rock up late. Occasionally, there may be a good reason. If something's happened, something's gone wrong, fair enough. But it's very easy to tell someone who's got a problem with timekeeping against someone whose life occasionally disrupts them, and timekeeping again. When I was an apprentice, I remember a couple of times I was late, and the horror that I felt at that, because you were keeping people waiting. That was the trouble. It's not just you being late; it's people waiting to get on site. They need to pick you up. And I think if you go further back than my apprenticeship days, I'd have ended up getting to work and there just would have been no one there, and I'd have had to find my way home for no pay that day. So, timekeeping is it's so important, and just from again, it's going to lead on to something else. Just from a good manners point of view, never mind the business and the hours of other people's time that you're wasting. It's just crazy to it's just rude to be late, really.
And we found it in the college, didn't we? And I pushed it for 3 or 4 years at the end there, that if we're starting at 9, you're there at 1:45. We're not there at 9. 9's too late. If the bus or plane leaves at 9, it leaves at 9 and you're not on the plane. So you're not going to Magaluf with your mates because you haven't given yourself enough time to get there. Works us out. The amount of times I'm paranoid, a bit like you probably, that when I used to be working with anyone, apprentice or as an electrician, they were picking me up and they said, I'll pick you up at 7:30. 7 o'clock I'll be standing there. Just half an hour beforehand. So, and if they were late, they were late, but I was never late. I'm going to be there half an hour in the cold, in the rain, waiting, at the door, waiting for it to open, etc. And I'm still terrible, as you well know, when I'm picking you up. I'll pick you up at 6, 5 o'clock in the drive.
But no, it's not bad.
But it's infuriating, isn't it? Especially because the person that's pulled up in the van clicked their handbrake on, looking about for somebody to come. Yeah. We used to have a rule. It used to be if the handbrake clicked up 3 times and the fan door never went, the handbrake went back down and the electrician drove off. So timekeeping, phone and timekeeping generally are the 2 major factors that ruin an apprenticeship.
And again, that's not just opinion. That's what we've seen, isn't it? This is what we've observed, learners coming back who've perhaps been successful in getting an apprenticeship. They've had that euphoric moment of getting the employment, which is brilliant. And then they have that kind of, the opposite end of that where they come and, well, what went wrong? Well, this, and this, and you can almost hear yourself in your head, can't you, repeating the lessons that you've tried to instill in them, over the course of their experience at college. But some people seem to learn the hard way, sadly.
And to find one electrical apprenticeship or apprenticeship, let's generalize it, construction apprenticeship or a business apprenticeship, whatever it is, to find one apprenticeship is hard enough as it is. Once you've lost that one, you've got to try and find another one. That's, you've found the diamond in the rough, and you now got to find a gold bar as well in order to get another apprenticeship, which is immensely difficult.
Yeah. So, like you say, once you've got the job, the last thing you want to be doing is throwing it away for something unnecessary, really.
Yeah. And now, let's imagine you're 16 and you're fortunate to get an apprenticeship, 17, 18, maybe in those early years of education, either at college or exiting full-time education. You've probably progressed yourself into a position where where you fit in that world. So of 16, 17, 18-year-olds, you might be quite a lively character, you might be quite a shy character and all the rest of it. But then you go into the working environment, whether you like it or not, you've pitched yourself at the very bottom of the tree. Yeah, and you've got to work your way up. And that's another thing that I think apprentices find hard, to think that all of a sudden no one's interested in your opinion, no one's interested in what you're doing what everybody else says. And that can be difficult, because I'm sure you haven't quite experienced yet, but I'm a little bit further into it than you. If you ask somebody in their teenage years to do something, the first reaction is no, never, and why would I? So, of course, when you're an apprentice and all of a sudden you've got to go and get drummer cable, another drummer cable, the toolbox, the ladder, the steps, you think, I don't want to do this. I'm afraid that's it.
that almost, well, this is not what I came here to do. Well, maybe it's not, but it's just part of the process, and we're not for a minute condoning, employers being disrespectful to apprentices or taking advantage of apprentices. But that first day when you put your foot on site, the least on that site. Whatever you've experienced at college, however well you did there, you are still, the least experienced person on that site. And therefore, it's not a case of them being disrespectful to you, getting you to shift stuff. It's a case of other people will be doing other things, that they have the experience to do and the knowledge to do. And you're not in that position yet, So, yes, for a while, you probably will be labouring a little bit. But, there's nothing wrong with that, because, again, you'll be, building your probably physicality. I mean, I remember when I started on site, and just I was not the the most kind of hench of lads. Some things never change, but you almost need that to start building up your strength a little bit, and being able to sort of get used to the grind of it, really. Do you know what I mean? And developing stamina as much as strength, I think, is really important.
Oh, your hands in the air. Hands in the air. I remember that when I first did it. I was like, keep these.
But that's it, isn't it? And you could spend years at the gym building up your physical strength, but it's a very different proposition to sort of trying to lug in toolboxes and cable drums and stuff like that. It's a very different world. So it's actually probably just part of the process that's going to develop you into an electrician. And again, don't take risks. You don't carry stuff that's too heavy for you, but you just got to get your grind on. You just got to graft.
And from their point of view, that's involving you. So you don't think it is. If they're standing there doing a panel and there's only one person can physically sit in the space of the panel, yet they need stuff. Actually, you're involved in the process now. I need a spanner, I need a lug, I need a crimp, and you've got to find them. So you're exploring the van, you're working out where everything is in the back of that van. So actually becoming useful without realising. But of course, we all want to jump into perhaps doing the electrical work. That's what you wanted to be. You didn't leave school to carry an electrician's toolbox around over a period of time. So again, it's perhaps understand your place, keep your ego in check, and just be very respectful. But also don't do anything, as you quite rightly said, that's unsafe, or you don't think loads that are too heavy, etc. That use your common sense as well as that approach. Yeah. And
it's that thing as well. You're completely entitled to your opinion, but it's like the time and place, isn't it? Of expressing that. And there may be stuff, realistically, that you have maybe learned. If you've done a full-time course at college, particularly if you've worked with Gary at the college, then there may be stuff that really really well that perhaps, some people who've been on site for a while may well have, sort of not thought about for a period of time. But it's about being respectful to the people who are in front of you, and not going wading in with, best and all that sort of stuff. Because actually, even if you're right, it's not going to bring a good result out. It's not going to make people listen to you, and it's not going to build good working relationships. And actually, you probably realise quite quickly, if you're going to be successful in an apprenticeship, that being successful at work is largely about building relationships with the people that you work with. Because if you can do that, then you'll support each other and help each other out when you need it. So the times when you become perhaps a little bit deficient, maybe an area you're not so good on, you'll have people who are willing to, sort of help you out, and vice versa. So, it's about developing that good working relationship with people, which basically just boils down to what I think is really important, massively overlooked, is just good respect and manners. Sort of being respectful to people, having good manners, without being smarmy, without sucking up to people. Just be polite, be well mannered. Don't think that you've got to be the funniest person on the construction site, or the life and soul of the party. Again, you may have come from a classroom where you were like, the clown, you were the one cracking jokes and making everybody laugh. It's not what you need. It's got to reflect on site in the construction world, but it's not the most important thing by a long chalk. So yeah, you do need to think about the environment that you're going into more than ever, really.
And to think you're probably going to be spending more time with the people at work than you do with other people, whether you be socialising or in your own family, etc. 8, 9, 10-hour days, or maybe even longer. You've got to learn to get on with each other. You've got to learn to work within each other's space and respect each other's boundaries, etc.
And that's interesting, because actually that includes the people who perhaps you don't like, whose personalities you don't click with, who you sort of think, well, I don't particularly get on with this person. You might have very different personalities. You've got to find a way to deal with that, and find a way to work alongside that person, because often you won't get a choice as to who you're working with. And again, that boils down to good manners and respect, and if you can show that, then even if, your personalities are very different and perhaps there's a bit of a clash there, good manners and respect will just kind of carry you over that period, I think.
Yeah, as you sort of mature into your role, and obviously your abilities increase. But on the back of that, I would say is not to be silent. So of course we've said about keeping your ego in check and your phone in your pocket and your timekeeping, etc. But to ask questions, relevant questions, what's happening, and look interesting. Try and always used to try and stay half a step ahead of the electrician once you knew what was going on. So you think, I know what he needs next. He'll need a 13 mil spanner. He'll need a posi drive screwdriver. He'll need some green and yellow sleeving. And just try and build that up, that you're actually paying attention, you're listening, you ask some really relevant questions.
Yeah, that's really important. And again, with that, you've got to make sure that the questions that you're asking, like you say, are relevant, but then you actually listen to the answer. So you're asking the question because you want to learn, not because you want to impress the person. I think that's really important, because again, that sort of goes back to that thing of, if someone's just asking a question just to go, I'm asking questions, that's no good. You've got to be asking that question because you want to learn, and if you want to learn, then you'll listen really carefully to the answer, and even if it means repeating it back to the person so that it's clear that you've got it, then that's all good.
Yeah, and as you progress through the apprenticeship, maybe into your first, second year, that you're obviously going to start doing electrical work. You're not going to be the grunt forever, and maybe at that start that you might have your own tools. And I know this is a very thorny issue for electricians. We're quite proud of our toolkits. We probably put them back in the same place, and you probably put them back even the right way round in your toolbox. And if you're lending your tools to the apprentice and he hasn't had the pain of paying for them, or heirlooms in some cases, and they don't go back in the toolbox, or they get left on site, that is not a great place to be. That packing up time when everybody wants to go is probably the time when the apprentice needs to focus the most, because everything needs to go back in that toolbox and back in the van, and not just half of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just thinking back on my apprenticeship days. So where's that screwdriver gone? And your blood would run cold at that moment, because you effectively, if you lose someone's tool, you're depriving them of their livelihood. You actually cost them money. I remember one time I was trying to cut through I was trying to cut Unistrut for the first time, I think, with a hacksaw, and I broke about 3 or 4 blades, like on the bounce, like literally just. Okay, right, I'm never going to be able to do this, and I felt awful. And again, I'm not suggesting this is the thing to do, but I actually left some money in the van because I felt so bad about breaking all those hacksaw blades. I was just that there. I just felt yeah, that might be more about me. I'm not sure that's probably not a good tip.
That's a Joeism. That is definitely a Joeism. So obviously we want to make sure they all go back in the boxes, obviously, so everybody can obviously have their tools in return. But you're then going to want your own tools, aren't you? So you're going to progress on to start to buy your own tools. So what's your advice there about actually building that first toolkit, Joe?
Yeah. The temptation, and I totally understand it, when you start as an apprentice, you look at the person you're working with and you see a toolbox full of tools and you think, wow, that's what I want mine to look like. I want a full set of tools. So, maybe you head down to, I don't know, somewhere like Wilko's or somewhere like that, and you see a lovely, and it's advertised 50-piece toolkit for 20 quid. And, it's worth every single penny that you spend on that bit of kit, because if you're buying 50 tools for 20 quid, the quality's not going to be there. I've made that mistake myself. I've bought a cheap screwdriver, gone to do up a screw, and the end of the blade twists. You end up with like a spiral on the end of your screwdriver. So yeah, my tip on that would be pick a brand that you really want to build on, so in screwdrivers, I don't know, maybe you're looking at Wera or Wiha or something like that, and save up. It's worth spending a bit more money on your tools, than buying the cheapest you can find. But get on with it, start building it up, but make sure that you're not buying cheap and buying twice, because if you don't want to go a year without buying anything, because it just looks like you're not interested in the job. But at the same time, you don't want to come in with a toolkit that is just not going to do the job. Sort of, you see in these kits, you've got a hammer in there that's about that big. Smash the toppy up. You want to pick a brand and think, right, I'm going to build up my stock. I'm going to build up my toolkit from that brand. I think when I was starting out, I bought a lot of Knipex. I think it was. I think I wanted all of my cutting tools to be Knipex, as it was. And even later on in my apprenticeship, I think it was Wera screwdriver, which I really liked. Yeah, so it's a good idea to do that. But again, be reasonable with that. I bought an Estwing hammer when I was an apprentice, and it's just like looking back, I think I spent a lot of money on that bit of kit, on a carpenter's grade hammer. It's just, is that necessary? I don't know. It's a bit stick. So you want to make sure that you're buying the quality tools that are going to last, really.
Yeah, buy as well as you can and buy it once, and then when they're had their life, then that's when we'll have another look at obviously buying another set. So all of these things are good top tips for people to try and keep their electrical apprenticeships. But obviously they've come out of the school world and they're now come into a world where they're going to need to learn again, effectively. And there's a wealth of information out there that can help them progress through that. And now sometimes it becomes a bit of we've seen it, haven't we? That one in the classroom, we know that one. Yeah. Too cool for school, too cool for college, too cool for me apprenticeship. And then all of a sudden, those exams aren't easy. These are technical exams, and a lot of egg can hit a lot of face at certain times during that course. So what's your recommendation for people who really want to do this? Remember when they got that job and they put it on Facebook, they got an apprenticeship and mum's put it out there and all the rest of it. What's your big advice about grasping the opportunity to learn?
Basically, listen to your teachers. So when they tell you to get kit, get the kit. If they tell you to come prepared with the stuff they ask you for. And my big bugbear is, let's say you're on an apprenticeship, so you're at college 1 day a week. Yeah. So you come to college on, I don't know, a Thursday. You do your day at college, you go home, and you chuck your bag in the corner, and then you pick your bag up again Thursday morning the following week, and that's the next time you think about college and the course you're on. That's no good. I always say to learners that if you're doing that, then you might scrape through, you might be okay, but you're not going to learn your trade. You need to have little and often revision. And you and me have put together a load of resources that we've worked on together to create. There's the eFix Apprentice Hub that has tons of information, tons of practice questions, there's obviously GSH Electrical, where you're watching this right now, and of course my channel, Joe Robinson Training, as well on YouTube. Little and often is the trick, and make sure that you're immersing yourself in the stuff that you need to learn about. And bear in mind, if the stuff you're doing on day 1 is easy and you think, well, I'm going to walk this, the stuff you're doing on day 20 probably won't be. It gets harder and harder as you go along. And actually, once you've started that process, you've just got to keep on dipping in all through the week. I say to my lads, just watch, do 15 minutes of something every day. That's not a big sacrifice of time at all. Everyone can find 15 minutes in the day to just do something, that is going over material, looking at the material for the next week's session, going over stuff you're not sure of. There's so much information out there now that there's really no excuse not to be revising continually. It's not even a case you've got to go home and look through your notes again. There's effectively, we repeat lessons online for people, don't we? This is what I say to people, that if you didn't get something. In fact, I often say to learners, when we start AC theory, one of the hardest subjects that we study, I say to them, you will not understand this the first time round. I don't expect you to understand it the first time round. But what I do expect you to do is to go home and look through the material that I've created online for you so that you can develop it and understand it more clearly. Because, when I was at college, I didn't really get it the first time round. And all I had was my scribbled notes that I'd taken during the lesson. Well, now you can go home and see the lesson again, and that's just one example. There's tons of stuff that you should be getting onto. So yeah, EFIX Apprentice Hub, the EFIX YouTube channel, GSH Electrical YouTube channel, Joe Robinson Training YouTube channel. Just the resources are there now. There's no reason not to be using that stuff.
And I would say that when I got my apprenticeship, I was wanted to be the best I possibly could at it. And I think, hang on a minute, am I the best I possibly? Now the opportunity, like you said there, to just spend 15 minutes, a day maybe, trying to be the best. You never be the best electrician ever, but you want to be the best possible electrician you can. Now, if college is going to be part of that process, like you said, you can't just go and focus on it on the day and then wait another week and then go again. I think you've got to immerse yourself in it and continual professional development. I know there's a lot out there about that, but look how much technology has changed in such a short space of time that we've experienced. And we were hidden, weren't we, in the world of colleges, and now we've seen an industry that's completely different than the one we probably left 10 years ago.
Absolutely, yeah, it's changed almost beyond recognition, really. Much more technical than it used to be, Yeah. And again, it's probably a different theme, but to people who are thinking about becoming electricians, just get on with your maths and your science, and make sure you've got your English, because there's so much technical reading to do, so much, maths to understand and scientific principles to understand. Just got to get prepping for that before you even start at college, really.
Yeah. And we'll end on this point. I always say, remember the day you got your apprenticeship. Remember when you came home and you got the phone call, an email, or however they've told you, the euphoria in your kitchen, in your lounge, the amount of people you rang, the amount of social media posts you put, that you were so pleased. Just remember that thought all the time. You're not doing enough. You didn't quite look at the assignment. You got up a bit late and you weren't bothered. You drank too much maybe the night before and you weren't working as hard as you could. Go back to the day when you were super excited about getting that apprenticeship and hold on to that thought, because it can be taken away as quickly as it was given.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, that one. We've seen learners come back and it just breaks your heart, doesn't it? And you can see that they're wishing they'd done something differently. So do something differently. Don't make that change and be the person that you need to be successful in that apprenticeship. Be the best you that you can be.
And I think that's a nice way to end. So hopefully we're probably, now if anyone's got to the end, you probably notice our lips never met the audio track. The audio probably came in and out, and we apologise for that. It's us trying to do a bit on Skype to continue obviously that contact with the apprentices and obviously the training world. We're going to try and get some more guests on. I'd like to interview Joe at some point and have his story of how he got his apprenticeship and how he ended up where he is yet. So we'll probably do that one. I'd like to think he may return the favour and interview me. That was a request, actually. We've had a couple of requests to do that. So that's all good. Yeah. So on that note, we're going to try and end it. We haven't done this for a long time, have we? So
yeah, okay. This is going to be hard to sync up. This. Well,
yeah.
We're never going to do it.
Well, let's try a high five first then. So high five. Ready?
Yeah, I'm this side. Ready? High five. Wow, your hand. You're putting your hand too close to the camera. You made your hand look massive. There we go.
Well, I've got massive hands. We know that. Look at that, huge hands. Your tiny little feet. Okay then, Joe. So here we go then. So we hope these top tips have been some help, don't we? So we hope this video
has been some help.